So where we left off, we had just taken the existing CAD lines and turned them into an actual solid model for the existing space on the site. Now it's time to take this and get it looking more like this. Now all that I've done here is I've just used the Boolean difference tool, the one that we've discussed in the last couple of videos, a bunch of times. So this is much easier than it looks. Now, I realize that for this project you'll have to do a lot of your own measurements and that kind of thing, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe when I did this project, I had the windows at about 2 meters by 2 meters in length and width. And then I just arrayed them with a difference of 1 meter in between each one, 9 windows in total on top. So that's what we're going to try doing right now. So first off, as you remember, whenever we do a Boolean difference, we need to create the solid model object that we're essentially going to be using as sort of like a chisel to chisel away the piece that we're subtracting from. So let's do that right now. Let's move over to our top plane right here, and we're going to move over to the box tool because we want those windows to box-like. Now let's begin drawing our 2 by 2 essentially chisel that we're going to use to Boolean difference away a hole for the window. So with the box selected, we can click anywhere in the top, and then what we're going to do first is we're going to type 2 for 2 meters, and we're going to hit enter. And as we can see right off the bat, in the left-right direction, it automatically has it now stuck on 2. That 2 is set. So now when we type 2 again, enter. Now look, we've got a 2 by 2 face that we're working with. Now for the third dimension, since this is just going to be a Boolean difference tool anyway, we'll make it 2 as well. So we'll type 2 for a third time and hit enter. And now that's essentially going to be like the tool that we're going to use to cut away from this face up here. Now you see there's just one of these, but if I'm not mistaken, I think there's 9 windows required along this upper floor for this face. So this is where I'm going to show you the array tool. The array tool is right down here. Now it is automatically set at the rectangular array, but that's not the one we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the little corner here, and we're going to left click, and then we see that we have a few options. We've got array along a surface, along a curve, polar array in a circle, and linear array. Now linear array is the one that we want. We're going to use it in just a second here. Let's hit escape. What I always like to do when I'm setting up something like this is, because we want Rhino to know that we're going to create an array in a very specific line, let's go ahead and create a little guide for ourselves. We're going to create a line there for the linear array to function from. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the Polyline tool. We're going to move over to a corner of this cube we've created. We're going to click. Now what I'm going to suggest is that as you move up in the top view, you hold down Shift so that it knows that we're working on a line that's extruding perpendicular from our shape. Then we'll left click again and hit enter. That's all that's going to do, is that's just going to serve as a bit of a guide for us as we use our linear array tool. So let's go back to the linear array tool. We'll move over to rectangular array, move down to the corner, select it. We're going to pick linear array over at the far right, left click, select objects to array. This is the object that we want, so we'll click anywhere on the cube, hit enter when done. You can hit enter or right click if you wish. Number of items, and then in brackets it says 8. So because we want 9, there's going to be 9 windows in the upper floor on this face. We're going to type 9 instead and hit enter. Now it wants to know what our first reference point is. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick that corner that we just drew a line from, because again, that's going to almost serve as a ruler to give us something to work from. We're going to left click and release. And look, since we're on that line, it knows, because if we don't use the line, as you can see, they can fly every which way. It can get a little bit complicated. So thanks to our O snaps and the line we just drew, we're able to keep in a nice straight line. So since our windows here are 2 meters wide, and they're supposed to be 1 meter apart, then what that means is that as we drag, and you see down here along the bottom, it indicates just how far we're dragging it along. We're gonna type 3 while our cursor is moving along our kind of ruler line we made. We're gonna type 3 because that comes out to a nice 1 meter of distance in between to 2 meters of window, and then we're gonna hit enter. Then we're gonna make sure that we hit left click, and there we have a linear arrayed 9 blocks that are going to sort of serve as our window that we're going to do a Boolean difference with. Now, as you remember, when we want to do a Boolean difference, what that means is this needs to actually be in touch with this so that this can actually cut something away from this bigger wall piece that we created in the last video. So this is where, because it needs to be lined up and touching, I'm going to teach you how to use the rotate tool. So now that we've got a linear array of these cubes that we're going to use for a Boolean difference, now it's time to show the rotate tool. But first, we're going to get these where we need them. So why don't we click and hold left click. We're going to do a select box in this view, release, and now we've got them all selected. Now we need to move these up to the face that we're going to revolve them to be on the same face with. So let's do that right now. We're going to type the letter M for move and hit enter. Now it's going to ask us what point we want to move from. It might not be a bad idea to grab this point down here in the perspective view just to make sure that the bottom of the box is the same as the bottom of the building plane. So let's grab that bottom corner, left click select, and then we're going to drag right over to this corner. Great. See, now they're touching. Now it's time for us to use the Revolve tool. The Revolve tool is very easy to use whenever you want to essentially just turn a series of faces aligned differently. So here's how we use it. Now it's time to use the rotate tool. So here's how we use it. We type R-O-T. When it says select objects to rotate, we're going to select everything that we essentially want to rotate so that it's meeting that new face. So 1, left click 2, 3, and now we hit enter when we're done. Now it wants to know where our center of rotation is. Now it wants to know where our center of rotation is going to be. Now, since we really want to make sure that we're rotating it around a sensible spot, we know that since we want to rotate this to essentially be on the same plane as this, we need to pick this somewhere on this bottom corner. So let's do that right now. We'll scroll in a little to make sure we're picking the right spot. There we see, that's the spot. This is why O snaps are so handy. We left click, and look, now it wants to take, essentially, it wants to turn everything we just selected somewhere around this radius. So we can really grab anywhere on here, but why don't we grab here? Right out to the very end of what we want to work with. And we'll hit select. And there you have it. Look at that. It automatically wants to rotate all of these together. We could just rotate one if we wanted to, but since we're going to be using these all for Booleans, we're going to take the whole bunch. So let's rotate. And look, now it meets the face of the wall just the way we need it to. We left click again, and now they're rotated. Now it's time we get these up in a position where we can actually subtract these out of this piece of wall. You remember from here how, as you can see, the windows aren't right up at the corner. They're inset a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, they're inset 2 meters from this corner, from the edge of the building, and 1 meter from the base of the flashing. No problem. here's how we're going to get them up there. We're going to use the Polyline tool to sort of figure out exactly where that spot is. This is the way I like to do it anyway. So we'll select the Polyline tool, left click. We're going to move over to where we want to start our polyline. And since we want to move it down 1 meter from the base of the flashing, which is in here. Oh, there we are. We're going to left click, drag down. And again, the OSnap knows that we want to move along the edge of this building. We're going to type 1. Now it knows that we want to draw a line that's 1 meter. So if we click, left click, that's just drawn a line that's 1 meter from the base of the flashing like we want. Now we need something that's essentially going to move in 2 meters from the corner of the building. What I like to do is, since we want it to be nice and perpendicular and not at some just slightly off perpendicular angle, I like to take the line all the way to the edge of the building. And you see how on our O-snaps there, it says perp for perpendicular. See it right there? Instead of and not, now it says perp. That's great, that's what we want. But that's way too long. So what we're gonna do is, now that it's going in the right direction, we're just gonna type 2, hit enter. Now look, it's still going in that perpendicular direction, but it's only going to draw a line that's 2 meters long. Now we'll click, hit enter, and now that corner there is exactly where we need essentially our windows to start. So now we're going to grab all of these Boolean difference kind of chisels that we're going to use, and we're going to drag them up to that spot. So we'll select them all. Left click, hold shift to select multiple, and left click, left click, left click. Always with shift held. Then you can release once you've got everything selected. Then we're going to type M for move, hit enter. Point to move from, let's grab this corner here because this is really where that corner needs to be. We're going to take it, select it, we'll drag it up right to that corner because that's where we know the windows start. We're going to left click, and now that's successfully moved. But what's the rule of Booleans always? They actually have to be touching or intersecting in this case to actually be able to do a successful Boolean difference. So we need to make sure that these are actually cutting away from this wall here. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to move over to this view, the top view. We're going to use the move tool again. Now this is where our O-snaps are going to come in really handy. You remember how we made this wall be 1 meter thick? And we made these boxes essentially be 2 meters in the thickness direction. That's perfect because that means that we're going to be able to do a nice Boolean difference with these. So here's how we'll do it. We're going to use the move tool, type M and hit enter. When it asks for point to move from, let's grab the midpoint of one of these because we know that that's going to be 1 meter. We're going to left click, we're going to drag it inward and everything we can do we're doing. We can also see in the perspective view we're just going to drag it in, and because again the O snap is on, it's going to move in a perpendicular direction, and then we're going to left click, and now they're actually touching. That means we can actually do a Boolean difference with them now. We're ready to do a Boolean difference. So as you remember, if we want to do a Boolean difference, we type BOOLEAN D, and then you can just hit enter if you don't want to type in the entire thing. And when it says select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract from, we want to cut away from the building. So we're going to select the building. Then we're going to press enter to continue. Then select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract with. We're going to click these nice boxes that we just moved up here. So we're going to, with shift held down, we're going to left click 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9. Now it says press enter when done. So we hit enter, And there we have it. We've just made ourselves some nice evenly spaced windows. And now essentially when I was doing this, this is exactly how I made all of the doors and everything like that on this model. I might have made the difference of how deep in I pushed it a little bit different, but for the intents and purposes of this project, it doesn't really matter. As long as we can tell that it's meant to be a window, it'll render as one, then it's okay. So this is how I made my windows and my doors.